Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Ethereum. We're going to be looking at the current market conditions. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on the premium list, which you can find a link to in the description below. You will get access to weekly reports, 2 premium videos per week, our risk dashboard, the Telegram alerts channel, many other things as well. Make sure you check that out in the description below if you want to lock in a lower rate. Let's go ahead and jump in. So Ethereum is now trading for a very modest $2,058. And you know, one of the things we discussed back in April and May was to expect a summer lull, if you will. Or when I talked about Bitcoin, I would discuss it as like a 3 to 6 month bear market where the prices would probably stagnate for a while and probably go lower, but that eventually we would probably come out the other side. And, you know, we're still technically in the summer now. So, I mean, I, for one, am not getting, I'm not really getting super bullish at this point. I sort of just look at the market and say, I think it's worth paying a little bit more respect to the trend at this point, and not getting super excited about every little move to the upside, but to look for actually a change in the momentum, okay? Because right now, the momentum still is technically down. Now remember, being technically correct is the best way to, in fact, be correct. And until this trend changes, I don't think we need to be, discussing the immediate implications of all-time highs. Like the likelihood that Ethereum just sort of goes straight back up and puts in new all-time highs without just kind of going sideways to some degree, first, or at least breaking the downtrend and then going sideways to sort of establish that, okay, the bulls will hold the line before we can continue higher. So far, we are continuing to put in lower highs, first at around 4,400, next at about 2,900 or so, and then at 2,400, and now we're trading at around $2,058. So the way I look at this market is to say, well, why don't we pull back and look at it compared to the prior cycle? So why don't we switch this over to the weekly time frame and then look what happened last cycle? Because remember, I'm a big proponent of lengthening cycle theory. I think that it makes a lot of sense for us to have a sustained lull in the market. For Bitcoin back in 2017, we had pullbacks. They were like 40% pullbacks, but we fairly quickly recovered from them. Okay, it's not like we just sat stagnant 55% below the prior all-time high at any point during the last cycle. I mean, you can see we moved up and then we came down, but then we started moving up fairly quickly without ever dropping more than about 40%. Now we're sitting around 55% down. So when we look at this, and we say, well, let's go look back at Ethereum and put on our bull market support pin. Where are we? And how concerning is it that we are below the 20-week estimate? Well, if you remember, we said many times during this run-up that it would be fairly likely to see a move below the 20-week moving average at some point, or the bull market support band, which again is a combination of the 20-week estimate and the 21-week EMA. We said, why do we expect that? Well, is it because we're bearish on the future strength of Ethereum? Well, no, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. All we looked at is said, well, last cycle we were able to drop below it, and it did not prohibit us from ultimately getting back above it, holding it as support for about a month, and then moving higher. Okay, so we have to recognize that things like that are always in the cards. We cannot assume that just because we go below the 20-week that it should be all doom and gloom from there on out. Now, when we look at this, we can see that, well, we had a fairly interesting move in the market back over here. Okay, let's look to see what happened. We came straight up, we came back down to the 20-week, back up to put in a new local high, and at the time a global high, an all-time high, back down to ride the 20-week. We had some scary wicks below, we held support, and then just before we thought we were out of the woods, we dropped. And then we moved up, okay? And then we moved up. Now, my thinking is that we could be somewhere, obviously I should say they're not going to play out exactly the same way. They're not going to play out exactly the same way. There are those that assume that we are about to drop to, say, $200. I've seen a lot of people throw out $200, basically just going back to where we started. way back where we spent a lot of time back in 2019 and 2020 and even in 2018. So I've seen a lot of people say that we're going to drop all the way down to $200. I personally think that's very unlikely. I've said before, even when we were 4,400, to expect a summer lull in the market. We've seen the 90-day ROI of Ethereum in the summer is not that great. Therefore, we would expect this period of 3 to 6 months for the valuation of Ethereum to not really do something that anything significant. And while some of you may look at this and will say, well, hold on a second, Ben, Ethereum's up recently. You're sitting here talking like it's moving down, but look at this. I mean, you should take a measured move and recognize that Ethereum is in fact up 20% over the last few days. That may be true, but I can assure you that your past self that was watching Ethereum over here would not care at all about you exclaiming, a 2,000 or 2,100 or even a 2,500 Ethereum is what you're getting out of bed for. So I don't really think that, this valuation of Ethereum is worth getting out of bed for by any stretch of the imagination, because we are putting in lower highs so far. We have not seen any sustained change in the momentum. We would like to see that. It just hasn't happened yet. One day, I think it will happen, and then we can start to look, okay, well, how do we get back out of this, and what is a theoretical path to get above it? We can go back and look at our sub-cycle ROI for the valuation of Ethereum and recognize that we have several sub-cycles within the grand within the grand scheme of an entire market cycle. But we look at this, and I say it's possible that we're just in this period where things are just going to be like this for a while, and you should not expect an immediate new all-time high. Honestly, and we like to be honest around here, I would not assume Ethereum's going to put it in all-time high until 2022 at the very least. Like, I wouldn't assume that Ethereum's going to be putting in an all-time high in 2021. If you think about it, Ethereum went straight up in 2021, more or less. It just went straight up. And we haven't spent a lot of time just moving sideways, establishing, okay, the bulls can hold the line at various levels. You saw it multiple times, at least twice, I guess, during the last cycle, where we went up, and then we had this long sideways movement. And we went up, and then we had a long sideways movement. And then we went up again. And then the next move, it took us down. And it took us down below where that sideways movement was. Okay? So when I look at this, again, I say, this sideways movement could last a long time. You might say, well, Ben, come on, what is sideways movement? I mean, the valuation of Ethereum is bled. I mean, it's down significantly. Well, that may be true, but even this sideways movement could be characterized by a 73% drop. The current drop in the valuation of Ethereum is a more modest 61%. Okay, so we've seen more drastic scenarios like this in the past. And when you look back at Ethereum, when you look back at the valuation of Ethereum, most people would look at this and say, yeah, I mean, like, this is just one crazy bull market. What they fail to recognize a lot of times is that, okay, crazy bull market, that aside, the move from here to then sustainably putting in a new all-time high took a year. This is 364 days. So essentially, Ethereum shot up. We came back down. We did nothing for a long time. We ultimately went below the 20-week SMA. We finally came back above it. Think about how scary that was if you weren't living it, okay? This was a 50% drop, but we recovered fairly quickly. So the 50% drop started in October. We bottomed in December, and then we were back off to the races in Q1. So don't assume that drops below the 20-week SMA have to necessarily be the end of the world for Ethereum. When I look at this, I say, well, we first need to get back above it until we can actually, start to get bullish about Ethereum putting in new all-time highs. Get above it, hold it as support, and then we can try to move higher. For now, if you're curious, the 20-week SMA is coming in at a very modest 23,000. Sorry, not 23,000. 2346. Maybe that was my future self dropping what the future valuation of Ethereum will be. Probably not this cycle, but and then the 21-week EMA is 2143. So we're currently below both of them. Okay, we're currently below both. We have a ways to go. I think we'll make it, and always, as I've said, always expect the downside risk. I think some people, they don't do themselves any favors because they just sort of ignore the downside risk. And it's all fun and games when you ignore the downside risk when it just moves up. But then when it moves down 60%, those that failed to understand what the downside risk is, maybe they get overexposed and they can't afford to just stay in the market. Now, you may say, well, even if they bought at $4,400, Ethereum should eventually bail them out. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you. I fully believe that Ethereum will bail the people out that bought in at $4,400. To some degree, that's what Ethereum does. It's what Bitcoin does. It bails the people out who bought it at the worst possible time. But what some people fail to understand is that not everyone can survive the period where the valuations go down. Some people need the money and they invest more than they can afford to lose. So always consider the downside risk when you're in a bear market, when you're in a bull market, because no matter what, you know there's downside risk. It's not a matter of if Ethereum will have 60 or 70% corrections. It's just a matter of when it will have 60 or 70% corrections. We cannot assume that Ethereum is going to go up, several multiples, tens of 20, 30, 40 times. We can't expect that to happen without having 60 to 70% pullbacks in the market. So if you can't stomach those, then, crypto is going to be pretty brutal, right? It's going to be pretty brutal. If you recognize that those will happen, and just sort of take them in stride and incorporate them into your strategy, then it changes the game a whole lot. I will say that crypto is a lot more about managing your emotions than anything else. You can try to time things all you want and try to time the exact bottom or try to time the exact top. But I will say, more than anything, crypto, I would say, is about managing your emotions, and it's about managing greed, and it's about managing fear. That's one of the things you'll learn relatively quickly. If you can start to get, as the old saying goes, right? Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy and whatnot. If you can stay resolute in being greedy when others are fearful and being fearful when others are greedy, that'll probably work out a lot better than if you're greedy when everyone else is greedy and fearful when everyone else is fearful. That's just not how it generally works. Again, it's easy to look back at phases in the cycle over here and say, man, I wish I'd got in. Man, I wish I'd got in early. And again, on this channel, we talked about the accumulation phase of a lifetime for Ethereum over here. There will be phases like that in the future, I'm sure, where we will look at the chart and say, it seems like the risk to reward is fairly attractive. I mean, I'll be honest, right? I mean, the risk to reward right now isn't nearly as attractive as it was back then. That doesn't mean that you can't expect to see a return on your investment over the next few years. It just means that it was very asymmetrical. And when I looked at the valuation of Ethereum over here at $200, I'm just like, well, it seems like the stars are aligned. It seems like what we think we know is that the valuation of Bitcoin should go up. And if we think we know that, then we should think we know that Ethereum's going to go up. Obviously, we were to some degree behaving in a deterministic manner, assuming. But again, I said if you're going to navigate crypto, you sort of have to behave in a slightly deterministic manner in the fact that you think Bitcoin will go up with time. As we've seen many times, Bitcoin controls the market. So if you assume that Bitcoin will ultimately fail and just trend to zero, then that's not good for other cryptocurrencies, despite what maybe has been, despite whatever Kool-Aid you maybe have drunk somewhere else. Bitcoin controls the market. So to operate in a slightly deterministic way, I think is okay, as long as that slightly deterministic way is Bitcoin should trend up with time. And if you assume Bitcoin should trend up with time, then you have to figure out the appropriate other cryptocurrencies that you think can give you attractive risk-adjusted returns. So I will say that, it's not nearly attractive buying Ethereum now as it was over here. We will have a phase in the future where it will be as attractive as buying here, but that could be years away. I mean, that could be several years away before it's so asymmetrical that it just seems like the potential upside is so worth it compared to the risk you're taking on. Right now, I think we have a lot of work to do. Again, I think we have a lot of work to do. Remember, February is only 6 months away. We always have January to look forward to with Ethereum. It's not until, later in Q3 that I really start talking about February and seeing if the stars are going to align. Right now, it's too early to say, right? Right now, it's too early to say if February is going to play out like it has in the past. If you're not familiar, it's just that Ethereum tends to make a really good move in January against Bitcoin. It's done that pretty consistently over the last 6 years. We covered, we prepared for it on this channel over the last 2 years. Takes a lot of preparation, takes the stars to align. It's happened 6 years in a row. Maybe we'll go for lucky number 7 and see if it happens the 7th time. But until then, just recognize that the market is technically still in a downtrend, that we have a lot of things to prove before we should assume that we can put in new all-time highs, and then just to manage your emotions accordingly as we navigate the market. And we will come out the other side, but it's going to take a long. I'm putting a little bit too much inspirational garbage out there, I think, for my taste. So if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. We also do have the premium list. You can find a link to that in the description below. We are having a sale on it, so if you want to lock in the lower rate, you can go ahead and do that as long as you don't cancel. So you get access to the weekly reports and videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the risk dashboard, and more. Go check it out. Lock in the lower rate. That'll wrap it up for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe, click the bell icon to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.